Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parish. Hope you are having happy holidays outside of what has occurred with the Grizzlies the last couple of days. Since I last did an episode, the Grizzlies have played 3 times. One of them was awesome. The other 2 were the stuff of nightmares. And now the Grizzlies find themselves mired in what I think the experts would call a slump. Now, it's probably best to keep a level head. There are some causes for concern. I think I would argue they aren't new causes for concern. Also, the losses on Christmas Day and on Tuesday night home against the Suns are plainly explainable with some simple stuff, such as 3-point shooting variance, and we can just write those off with maybe without spiraling into the depths of despair. Also, when you return home after a West Coast trip, teams are susceptible to big letdowns. There's literally a scientific paper that my wife sent me that was published in the last year about eastward jet lag, where teams flying back home to the east after playing out west in the NBA are much, much worse. That's obviously part of it, I think. So we can write off some of these big concerns and say, listen, if you get outshot from the 3-point line, you're going to lose a lot in the NBA. And if you get destroyed from the 3-point line, like the Grizzlies did on Christmas, like the Grizzlies did in the home game against the Suns, well, it's really hard to win. Now, there are other parts of it that make it less palatable to try to digest or to try to excuse. Yeah, the Warriors are awesome at home. They have the best home record in the NBA, but no Steph Curry, no Andrew Wiggins. And you get torched. You get blown out. The franchise's first Christmas Day game, and it's not competitive. It is an ugly, ugly loss. Jordan Poole is cooking Dillon Brooks. Ty Jerome and Anthony Lamb annihilate the Grizzlies bench. You play the Suns. The Suns don't have Devin Booker. And you get blown out again. The Grizzlies cannot buy a 3-pointer. But, all right, that's a thing we thought was going to happen this year. Or at least it's a concern I had. Earlier in the year, we were pretty fired up because the Grizzlies were making 3-pointers higher than I expected. And I think this might just be returned to the norm somewhat. I also think it's an outlier how bad the 3-point shooting has been recently. Clearly, Desmond Bane came back. That's something that happened in the last 3 games. The Grizzlies have had their full complement of players. Desmond Bane returned after his long time off with the toe. The first game back with Desmond Bane was that blowout win over the Suns. We're feeling great. But since then, he's had 2 really poor games in a row. He's only 2 out of 19 3-pointers since he returned from injury. And that is a big outlier. Desmond Bane is not going to have, probably over the rest of the season, a 3-game stretch where he makes 2 out of 19 3-pointers. It's not going to be that bad. The Grizzlies now have gone 4 consecutive games without making double-digit 3-pointers. That's the first time they've done that since Taylor Jenkins became head coach. This is the worst 4-game stretch, arguably, for the Grizzlies making 3-pointers since Taylor Jenkins and Ja Morant got here. They're 29 for 118 from 3 in their last 4 games. The 29 made three-pointers over a 4-game span is the fewest threes over any 4-game span in the last 3 seasons. You got to go back to February of 2020 to find a time the Grizzlies made fewer than 29 three-pointers over a 4-game span. So regardless of who's playing for the other team, regardless if it's Dwayne Washington lighting you up, if you only make 7 threes a game and your opponent makes 16 or 17 or 18, it's basically impossible to win. Now, I'm going to be all over the place in this episode. I mean, 3 games to wrap up, obviously, and also my mind is firing everywhere with Christmas break and such. But we'll try to break down for me, like, what are the truly concerning things? What are things we got to worry about? What are things that we can just shake off? Water off our back, no big deal. These things happen in the NBA. We're not going to get too panicked. I'm going to turn it back to the game on December 23rd, which was one of the most fun games of the year. National TV on ESPN, you blow out the Suns. You lead wire to wire. The Grizzlies' 7th wire-to-wire victory of the season. You win by 25 points, destroying this Suns team. It was the Grizzlies' 4th 25-point win of the season, or the 4th win by at least 25 points. That's the most such blowout wins of all teams in the NBA. And I like to remind you, last season, the Grizzlies had the most 25-point or more victories. So it's like, all right, this is the blowout team. This is what we do. Ja Morant was just like in pure point guard mode, setting his teammates up, having a double-double. Didn't have to score because everybody else was scoring. Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brandon Clark both have 24 points and 10 rebounds. That is the first 20-10 game in the regular season of Brandon Clark's career. He had a 20-10 game against the Timberwolves last year in the playoffs. It is the 9th 20-10 game of Jaren. That's including the postseason. It's the second 20-10 game of this season. To get Bane back, to say, okay, we're finally fully healthy, and then to blow out the Suns, we were riding high. And again, it's that pendulum. Man, that pendulum of we are feeling good after a victory. We feel like we're maybe one of the best teams in the NBA. And then it swings. And we talked about it after the Bucks win. You beat the Bucks by 41. You won 7 straight games, and you're feeling invincible. And then you start the road trip. You lose to the Thunder, who don't have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, don't have Josh Giddey. You lose to the Nuggets, who didn't have Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. that night. But then you're like, okay, you know, we made up our own excuses for those games, and we're like, look at us. We blow out the Suns. We're fully healthy. We're back. But then you drop 2 more. To the Warriors with no Steph and no Andrew Wiggins. To the Suns without Devin Booker. Also without Landry Shamet. Without Cam Payne. They don't have Cam Johnson. Like you say, all right, Landry Shamet, who cares? Landry Shamet had been balling for them while Devin Booker had been out. They started a bizarre lineup for them. They had Jock Landale starting at the 4 alongside DeAndre Ayton. They had to size up with Torrey Craig and Mikal Bridges. Didn't matter. They beat down the Grizzlies. And now we're stuck with some weird stats, too. Like, we talk about the Grizzlies being fully healthy, but they are now 6-9 over the last 2 seasons when they're fully healthy, when they have the preferred starting lineup. When Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams play. 1-2 this season, the last 3 games. They were 4-6 in the regular season last year and 1-1 in the postseason. Now, I don't think that reflects a reality that the Grizzlies are somehow better without those players. I think it's just a random aberration that they've posted such a bad team record when all those players are healthy and available. Last season, if you remember, they were more than plus 20 points per 100 possessions when those 5 guys played together. So I don't think there's anything weird about when the whole team's healthy that they play worse or anything. But we're not, again, we don't feel as elite as maybe we thought we were. We circled it preseason. We circled it in the regular season. This is the tough part of the schedule. How will the Grizzlies respond? They're kind of failing that test. They've lost 4 out of 5. 1-3 on that road trip, and then you drop the first one to the Suns back at home. It doesn't get any easier. You play the Raptors on the road on Thursday. The Grizzlies do not have a great road record. You come back home, you have to play the Kings and the Pelicans. Those are tough games. I don't know how it changes my overall view of the Grizzlies. I still think they're as good as maybe anyone in the West. I obviously fear the Warriors more than a lot of teams. The Suns got some bad news that Devin Booker's going to be out at least another month. But are the Grizzlies better than the Suns when they have Devin Booker healthy and Cam Johnson healthy? I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me if the Grizzlies could beat them in a 7-game series. Because, we're seeing Bane and a Nadir. Bane's never going to be this bad again. And Jaren, okay, I don't know what to make of Jaren. We have a lot of things to talk about with Jaren. He has been inefficient in his last few games. His scoring average for the season has plummeted back down. He's at 15.9 points per game this season. His career average is 15.8 points per game. All of the celebratory articles and podcasts and everything about, oh, hey, Jaren is this new guy. He can score now. We're seeing all-star level Jaren. Well, that's slipped away again. It's Jaren battling foul trouble again. We can also talk about the foul trouble thing that once again raises its head, its ugly head, in the game against the Warriors on Christmas Day. Jaren was in foul trouble. Barely plays. Just like the loss against the Nuggets. Jaren's in foul trouble. Barely plays. Jaren does not foul out of these games. Jaren averages 25 minutes per game this season. A lot of that's because of foul trouble. A lot of that's because of the substitution patterns. They're purposely keeping his minutes low. But the Grizzlies keep losing games where Jaren gets taken out for foul trouble. Jaren hasn't fouled out of a game this year. You're costing yourself, in my opinion. I know Chris Harrington's big on this as well. If you take Jaren out with foul trouble and then you get down by 20, what's the point? Who cares if Jaren's available to play garbage time at the end of the game? You're losing the game when Jaren's not in there. And because of these blowouts, like in the last 3 games, that's 1 big win for the Grizzlies and 2 big losses. The fourth quarters have been meaningless. They've been garbage time. And because of the normal substitution pattern for the Grizzlies where Jaren plays 5 or 6 minutes to start the first and second halves, well, we're barely getting any Jaren minutes. The Grizzlies were on an 8-0 run against the Suns on Tuesday night. 5 minutes into the third quarter, and it's Jaren's time to come out. By the time he comes back in, the run's long over, and now they're down by 19 again or whatever. Jaren's not playing very much in the competitive portions of the ballgame. I put some of these stats out on social media after the loss to the Warriors. Against the Warriors through 3 quarters, Jaren Jackson Jr. played 10.5 minutes. That's 10.5 minutes of the 36 minutes of game time. The Grizzlies were down by 15 after the third quarter. They lost by 14. Against the Nuggets through 3 quarters because of foul trouble, Jaren played 11.5 minutes. The Grizzlies were down by 14 after 3 quarters. They lost by 14. The man hasn't fouled out yet because we're saving him. We're so worried about him fouling out. I think you got to let him play through that foul trouble. I think it's harming the overall team to do that. Another big issue, obviously during this cold shooting stretch, is the shooting of the wings, like the big contributors to that. Yes, the aberration is Desmond Bane. 2 for 19, probably not going to happen again over any 3-game span. But some of the other guys, all right, Dylan, he's 3 for 13 in these 4 games, which is weird because 2 of these games he was 1 for 1. It's also strange, normally I feel like Dillon can be a scapegoat. I mean, Dillon got torched by Jordan Poole, but he's doing his job trying to guard Poole. I mean, Klay Thompson got the last laugh on Dillon. But Dillon is not losing these games on the offensive end like a lot of people like to paint him as the scapegoat. Dillon's not shooting the ball very much. Dillon now this season, when Ja and Desmond both play, averages 12 field goal attempts per game. That's what we want from Dillon. In the victory against the Suns, that's a perfect game from Dillon. 9 field goal attempts, made 7 of them. 16 points, 2 assists, 2 steals. Perfect. He made a lower percentage of his shots in the game against the Warriors and the Suns, but he's not shooting a lot. But anyways, in the last 4 games where the Grizzlies have really bottomed out shooting threes, Dillon's 3 for 13. Is that an aberration? No. 3 for 13 is a normal Dillon stretch. Jaren is 3 for 13. Earlier this season, where we thought maybe Jaren's three-point stroke had rediscovered itself, but I think 3 for 13 is not a huge outlier. It's just the normal, natural ups and downs of the season. Ja, during this stretch, 9 for 28 from 3. The last 2 games, Ja's the only guy who could make a shot. On Christmas Day, Ja's the only guy who shows up, it felt like. He played huge. I mean, his defense was a little bit lacking. Against the Suns in the loss on Tuesday, Ja had a 22-point third quarter. But also one of the plays of the game for me is Ja, who's guarding Dwayne Washington, who's having a career game. Dwayne Washington on a 2-way contract for the Suns. Ja Morant gets absolutely erased by a screen. He allows Dwayne Washington to dribble up into a three-pointer. It was a run killer. Dwayne Washington had a huge first half, comes into the second half. Basically, his first possession is he just to dribble straight up the court, walk into a wide-open three. Maybe there's a miscommunication between Ja and Brandon Clark on what the coverage was. You would think Ja would not go under the screen there. He just allowed himself to get taken out of the game. Dwayne Washington drills a three, kills a lot of the Grizzlies' momentum. But Ja in this 4-game stretch is 9 for 28 from 3. That's not like an outside the ordinary stretch for Ja. Santi Aldama's been a bright spot. Santi Aldama's outlier good in the last 4 games, 6 for 10. Santi Aldama leads the team in three-point shooting in the month of December. He's making 52% of his threes. Aldama is stepping up. He's not affected by his role, it seems like. Guys who are affected by the role, oh boy, John Conchar. John Conchar, MIA, man. Conchar scored 5 points in garbage time against the Suns on Tuesday to now total 6 points in his last 4 games. He'd gone 3 games without making a shot. Even with a garbage time three-pointer, he's 1 for 7 from 3 in the last 4. Tyus is 1 for 7 from 4. Ziaire, he made a garbage time 3. He's 2 for 10 on three-pointers in the last 4 games. Conchar and Ziaire, and also now Roddy, because Roddy's been pushed out of the rotation, but those guys that we were depending on the second unit have been giving you nothing. And so you find these games against the Suns shorthanded, against a shorthanded Warriors team where you're losing the three-point battle by 10. And early, you're already down by 10 in the three-point totals. Like there was a point in the second quarter against the Suns on Tuesday where they were down 9-1 on made threes. At the end of these third quarters, it's like, all right, 17 made threes for the Suns, or 18 made threes for the Warriors. The Grizzlies have 6. The Grizzlies have 7. Because of this terrible shooting slump the Grizzlies are on, they now average the same number of made threes they did last season. Again, we were excited that the number of made threes was up. It's settled back down. Although technically, because of the 2 garbage time three-pointers against the Suns on Tuesday, they now average 11.55 threes per game, or 11.545, on and on, which is actually 0.02 of a three-pointer better than last season, 11.52. So they're essentially now making the same number of threes per game as they did last season. Their half-court offense this season, and yes, it's affected by the recent poor play, but if you take the whole year to date, We're talking 33 games. And this is something I do think is concerning. If you take the whole 33-game season so far for the Grizzlies, their half-court offense is just as bad as it was last year. Last season, the Grizzlies were 22nd in points per half-court offensive possession. This season, they're 25th in the league in points per half-court possession. Last year, they were 24th in true shooting percentage. This year, they're 25th in true shooting percentage. The company line was, we're sacrificing steals and forced turnovers and transition opportunities to replace it with three-point shooting and better half-court basketball. Now, there's context to this. Bane's been out. Bane missed a ton of the season. Bane, since returning, has been bad, or he's struggled with his shot. So those numbers, while they're bad to say, they are colored by the fact that Bane hasn't been available. When Bane is going to be healthy and Bane's going to be the guy we saw at the beginning of the year, they're going to be a lot better. But the Grizzlies aren't getting out in transition. I mean, they are compared to the rest of the NBA. They are 5th in transition opportunities this season. Last season, they were 1st. But the half-court offense is slowing down. It's bogging down. And your players on the wing are kind of disappearing. Your bench is disappearing. And when Jaren and Desmond both have bad games, have bad offensive games, you don't have enough. If Dylan's not totally on, and if Bane and Jaren are bad, I mean, you're going to lose. But that's not, that part of it I don't find that concerning. That's just for every NBA team. Every NBA team, if 3 of your best 4 players don't have good shooting nights, probably going to lose a basketball game. We hoped the Grizzlies roster had baked in that even if, some of those guys have bad shooting nights, there are other talented players on the bench who can carry you. No, not so much this year. At least not so much yet this season. Like spelling out the wing issues. Since December 5th, which is an arbitrarily selected date, just so you know, just to make these stats sound worse. But this is basically since Ziaire Williams came back. Ziaire Williams struggling with his shot. All right, we won't have to be that worried about it. There are things I'm worried about with Ziaire. I'll get to that in a second. But since December 5th, David Roddy is 7 for 33 on his three-pointers. That's 21%. Ziaire Williams is 3 for 26 on three-pointers this season. It's 11.5%. And John Conchar, 4 for 18 on threes. That's 22%. Those are your guys you're depending on to shoot. And then you sprinkle in, oh, by the way, Desmond Bane, 2 for 19 on threes since you came back. And that is where the Grizzlies are falling flat. And when the three-pointers don't go in, it makes everything else feel worse. It highlights the fact that, hey, you didn't grab that defensive rebound. Or you get outworked to that loose ball. Or, the offense is bogging down, well, because the three-pointers are missing. If 2 or 3 more three-pointers go in, all of a sudden all the numbers look a lot better. Let's take a quick break, and then I'll get into some more stuff with the Grizzlies over the past 3 games, and also express some of the concerns I have about Ziaire Williams. Fast Break Breakfast and Grits and Grinds are now video podcasts. Fast Break Breakfast, hosted by me, Keith Parish, with John Burr and Chuck Anderson, serves up serious NBA analysis in a not-so-serious way. Then there's Grits and Grinds, which you're listening to right now. It is for the obsessed Grizz fan, just like you know, and it is available on YouTube. So, subscribe to Grits and Grinds and Fast Break Breakfast on YouTube or in any podcast player or at grindcitymedia.com. All right, so one thing interesting about the second Suns game, the loss on Tuesday, is they swapped up the rotation as far as the substitution pattern of the backups, largely because we can assume of these struggles of the wing players. Because John Conchar, who's now gone 11 games without making more than 1 three-pointer in a game, because Conchar had been struggling and because Ziaire had been struggling, coming into this game, he was 3 for 30 on all non-layup dunk attempts. They decided to put Ziaire in as the first wing off the bench. So this meant Ziaire Williams played his first minutes in the first quarter all season. He actually made a couple jumpers, which is good to see. But I got to say, and I know he hasn't played that much this year, but I am deeply concerned about Ziaire Williams. I don't get Ziaire Williams as a basketball player. I don't get the idea. My problems that I saw last year and even in Summer League is all of his offensive moves, they seem robotic. Now, he's got some good moves, and he's a solid shooter. He's a play finisher. His best skill is play finishing. Open three-pointers, catching lobs. He does seem to have good game feel about when to cut to the basket, where he can receive a pass from one of his teammates. So he's very good at that. And he's obviously has great size. He's very, very athletic. But he's not a good ball handler. He can't beat his opponent on offense. Like one-on-one, he's not going to get past a guy. He's purely a play finisher. Now, you need play finishers. They're important to have. And again, the idea of him being a knockdown three-pointer, we've seen enough flashes. He even made a handful of them in the playoffs. We're like, okay, second half of last year, he's making threes. He's a great lob finisher. We need that vertical spacing in our half-court offense, and it's an asset to have in transition. But when his shot isn't going in, he doesn't give you anything else. And I'm talking like nothing else. He's not a great defender. He doesn't give you steals or blocks. He's a bad rebounder. He gives you no deflections, basically. He's one of 7 guys in the NBA right now who's played at least 150 minutes this season who's yet to recover a loose ball. Last season, there were 16 players who played at least 1,000 minutes and recovered fewer loose balls than Ziaire. 277 guys played over 1,000 minutes last year. Ziaire was 260th in recovering loose balls. Of those 16 players to recover fewer loose balls than Ziaire last year, 8 of them were in their 30s. Ziaire does not have a nose for the ball. So he's an okay-ish defender, a not good rebounder. He's not a great passer. He's not a good dribbler. I don't know, man. I don't know what the dream is. I don't know if he provides the effort hustle plays. And when I say that, I don't mean he's not trying. Everyone tries in the NBA. But you see a guy like Josh Okogie for the Suns who's creating opportunities for his team. He's getting offensive rebounds. He's getting steals and deflections. He's creating havoc with his play. Now, not every player can be that. And I have a inclination to favor those guys. I normally like the guys who, okay, they have this knack for making a play. All right, maybe they're bad at shooting, but I'd rather have the guy who can get the rebounds and the steals and struggles at shooting. When the shots go in, it's a bonus, versus the guy who's a smooth offensive player, but when his offense isn't there, what is he giving you? And I worry that's where Ziaire is leaning towards. Now, clearly he's young. He's 21. Hopefully, me saying I'm losing some confidence in Ziaire will result in Ziaire just going off, and everyone can throw this in my face. But my panic meter on Ziaire, it's not just the shots aren't going in. For me, it's that nothing else happens. Outside of the shooting, what does he give you? And that was a concern last year, and now seeing it this year, and again, this is probably me lashing out because of a bad few days of Grizzlies basketball. But I'm a bit concerned about Ziaire Williams. It's funny where I see people being like, Ziaire Williams is untouchable in trades. And I'm always like, I don't think other fan bases value this guy like you guys think they do. Even if you made Ziaire Williams touchable, which is not a word people say, I guess, in a trade, it's not getting you anything. So again, you wouldn't pull the plug on Ziaire by any means. I'm just saying I'm a little disillusioned right now with Ziaire Williams. One thing I thought was interesting that we found out in the last couple of days, at least I found out, was in the first Suns game. The super duper fun, couldn't believe how enjoyable it was. The Grizzlies blow the Suns out despite not making any three-pointers in that game either. On the ESPN broadcast, Danny Green announced that his plans are to be back before the All-Star break, and he is on track to do so. Now, technically, he also said this 7 months ago, so maybe he's just being consistent, sticking to that line. But if Danny Green did come back before the All-Star game, that'd be awesome. That would be a boost to this Grizzlies team. So hopefully that injury news is accurate. Of course, it's coming from the player, so we don't know how accurate that news is. Also, before the Christmas Day game, now I'm definitely bouncing around, finishing up my notes. Ja Morant made some headlines talking about how he was asked, what teams is he concerned about in the league? And he said Boston, like they're really good. And he was asked, are there any teams in the West that concern you for getting out of the West? And he said, I'm fine against the West. He's not worried about the West. I think it is fair to point out now, the Grizzlies are 9-10 against the Western Conference. The Grizzlies have the 9th best record in the West against the West. 9-10 against the West. And I know I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth when I sort of agree with Ja. I mean, I'm not overly concerned about anybody in the West. I mean, I'm concerned about the Warriors and the Mavs. I have a healthy fear of the Nuggets and even the Clippers and the Suns. But I think it's reasonable, if fully healthy, the Grizzlies could beat any one of those teams in the playoffs. I mean, the Pelicans are really good. Pelicans are tough. I think the Grizzlies are just as good as any of those teams right now. But I think there is some parity where I don't think the Grizzlies are clearly better than them. And of course, if the Grizzlies, make 7 3-pointers a game, they're going to lose to all of those teams. Another thing about this Grizzlies team, and this is really focused on the, the grits and grinds, obsessive talking points. Now that the Grizzlies are fully healthy, my mind naturally turned to, oh great, let's do the death lineup. When are we putting our best 5 out there? And I know Steven Adams has been great. I mean, Steven Adams is crushing it this season. Steven Adams had a good game against the Warriors. Although, I mean, you could feel some of his limitations, but still, Steven Adams, 7 offensive rebounds in his 21 minutes. Had a positive plus-minus. Steven Adams is super good. But I still think the Grizzlies' ceiling is with what I call the death lineup. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Brandon Clark playing together. By the way, Brandon Clark, career high. He was 10 for 10 from the free throw line. He pulled ahead of Ja Morant on season-long free throw percentage. He has since fallen into tie with Ja. By the way, Ja against the Suns on Tuesday, 15 for 16 from the foul line. Great job for Ja making his free throws. They're now tied at a 74.4% free throw percentage for the season, which is good for Brandon, which honestly is still bad for Ja Morant. Please make more of your free throws. But with the team fully healthy, my mind turns towards, all right, let's unleash the death lineup. This is a lineup that wasn't available last year during the regular season. I predicted going into the playoffs last year that this is the lineup that they're going to turn to the most, and it's going to be the Grizzlies' most important weapon. I still think it was the most important weapon. They did turn to it at the end of games, but I was very frustrated that they didn't turn to it in the beginning of games. They seemed to save it. They kept saving it, and because of foul trouble, because of Dylan Brooks ejections, because of injuries, we still didn't get to see it very much last season. But it was successful. It was wildly successful as far as from a net rating standpoint. It was wildly successful last season. And because they turned to it in fourth quarters of close games, I took that to mean they understand this is one of our best things we can go to. So, naturally, I'm excited to see it this season. Coming into the year, it's the thing I'm looking forward to the most. Those 5 guys playing together. Well, in the blowout win over the Suns, we didn't see it at all. I'm like, all right, save it for a good time. Or save it for a time when you need it. Against the Warriors on Christmas Day, you're getting hammered. Jaren Jackson Jr. is in foul trouble. They finally busted out in the fourth quarter when you're down 19. Maybe they would have gotten to it earlier if there hadn't been the foul trouble from Jaren. But they only go to it down 19 in the fourth quarter. If the game had been close, were they going to close with it? It's possible. I think, once again, just how they did it in the playoffs last year. They built their rotation so you would eventually get to this for a large segment of the fourth quarter. Why that doesn't mean they prioritize making those minutes happen in the first half? Beyond me. No idea. So they play it for a few minutes of the fourth quarter. They go on a tiny bit of a run, but it's too late. Too little, too late. Against the Suns on Tuesday night. Somehow, they also don't go to it until they are down 19 in the fourth quarter. Once again, in consecutive games, they don't use this 5-man lineup until the game's over. You're down 19, 10 minutes to go. What's wild is cleaning the glass, tracks just the non-garbage time. And so some of these minutes, I think, ended up being in garbage time. But they were given credit for 11 non-garbage time possessions. So this death lineup that I call it has been used for 11 possessions so far this year. They won those 11 possessions 11-7. Modest games. But you add that to the playoffs last year, where in the 87 possessions you played this lineup, you won those minutes 120-89. And then, of course, you throw in the 13 possessions from last regular season, where they won those 13 possessions 14-8. You're now up to 111 possessions all time for Ja and Desmond and Dylan and Brandon and Jaren. And you've won those minutes by 41, 145-104. It's a plus 36.9 net rating. So even in these two losses, we got 11 possessions of them. And then, again, 11 possessions is a meaningless sample size. But they win every single time they go to it, it feels like. And I don't know what they're waiting for. I don't know if Jaren's not in foul trouble, if you're gonna bust these out quicker. But they have not done it. And what's worse for me is they keep finding Tyus and Ja minutes, despite everyone being fully healthy. They keep playing small ball. The Tyus and Ja minutes are at a negative 8.7 net rating this season on nearly 500 possessions together. They have a 120 defensive rating when Tyus and Ja play together. They were good last year together. They were terrible the previous season. So far this year, it's been a bit of a struggle. They're also doing they did some small ball lineups. They did it against the Warriors because of the foul trouble. They played Ziaire again like a power forward. Dylan and Ziaire, small ball minutes with Brandon Clark as your only big. Brandon Clark is your only big this year. Those minutes have not gone well. Minus 12 net rating in the Brandon Clark as the only big. Lineups with Tyus and Ja and Ziaire and Brandon, absolute obliteration so far, but I think it's going to get better because obviously Zaire's not making any shots. But I don't think, and I continue to think this, so maybe it's my fault for being in a rut and not being open-minded enough. I don't think with the Grizzlies personnel, small ball is to their advantage. They don't score at a high enough pace to make up for what they're giving away on the defensive end. So it's something to monitor, I guess. But ideally, you're going to keep two of Brandon Clark, Santi Aldama, and Jaren and Steven Adams on the court. I think that's to your benefit to play those guys. By the way, the exact number, Ja and Tyus minutes with Brandon Clark is the only big. It's 105 possessions, and the Grizzlies minus 14 net rating, 127.5 defensive rating. Wrapping up, Jaren Jackson Jr. tied Rudy Gay for 5th on the franchise list in total blocks. He got his 420th block against the Suns on Tuesday. I mean, Jaren had a miserable shooting night. Miserable. 2 for 12 from the field, 0 for 4 on three-pointers. He got the 3 blocks, 2 steals. Pretty solid stuff. Only 2 personal fouls. 26 minutes of playing time. Taylor Jenkins, by the way, in the win over the Suns, that moved Taylor Jenkins into 2nd in franchise history in most coaching wins, regular season wins, passing or breaking a tie he had with Dave Yeager. Jenkins, in his 4th season, he is the only second coach in the history of the Grizzlies to have 4 seasons coaching the Grizzlies. Lionel Hollins had 7. Things are going to get better. The shots are going to fall. Desmond Bane is going to find his footing. And then it's going to be, all right, how do we stack up against the best teams? I mean, that was always the question coming into this year. How do we stack up against the best teams? Are we good enough to advance further than we did last season? Are we good enough to compete for a title? The last 5 games don't give you a ton of confidence. Even if you dial it back to the week before, when we said, all right, now our really easy schedule turns tough. We got to play the Hawks. We got to play the Bucks. We got to go on a 4-game road trip. Thunder, Nuggets, Suns, Warriors. All right, we beat the Hawks. Well, they didn't have their guys. We blew out the Bucks. We feel great. We blew out the Suns. We feel great. But then you get blown out. You get blown out by a shorthanded Warriors team. You get blown out on your home court. It's a shorthanded Suns team. You lose to the Nuggets, who are looking awesome right now. And I don't know if we have a lot of answers where we can say, all right, we definitely are one of the 4 best teams, 5 best teams. We're in the conversation when we play well. Can they play well a little bit more? Who knows? That's the big question. We will see. Anyways, I hope you had a great holiday season. I appreciate you listening to this show. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Write me a 5-star review on whatever podcast app you are using. Anyways, hope you're having a great Wednesday. Talk to you soon. Go Grizz.